Hi, I'm Cody Knott's class of 1990, and you're watching Dingo Talk.
What's going on, Chuckleheads? I am Carlo Guadagnino. This is the Dingo Talk Alumni Tour. My guest this week is Cody Knott's class of 1990. Cody's going to tell us everything about his experience at Bethany, what he thinks about education currently in the state of where it is, a little bit of the history of once he left Bethany, and then we'll get back into the conversation of what the brand is and why you would send someone to Bethany. But it's not my story to tell; it's Cody Knott's story. So here he is, class of 1990, Cody Knott's. You wanna know by now. You wanna know by now. You wanna know by now. You wanna know. You wanna. What's going on, Chuckleheads? I am Carlo Guadagnino. This is the Dingo Talk Alumni Tour. My guest this week is class of 1990s, Cody Knott's. Cody, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
So we're gonna do this the same way we do every week. Cody, how did you end up finding yourself here in Bethany?
Uh, well, I was a Disciples of Christ member, and I had two high school teachers who both went to Bethany. And I make this joke. I say every good and bad decision I made was because of women, and they were two of the most beautiful women I've ever met. And so I said, I'll go to Bethany. It's Jill Miller. She was Jill Campsey then, and why am I forgetting Mrs. Cole's name? I think it was Freda. It was Freda Alexis, I believe was her maiden name.
And that was it. They told you to go to Bethany, and you. Okay.
Well, I mean, my mother wanted me to go there, and I mean, they're both beautiful women. They're still alive, so they're beautiful women. And I was in school with Mrs. Miller's son. We were in Boy Scouts together. So just really neat people.
Well, and being a
We were both
disciple,
Siamese.
does Bethany hold a certain? Is there something about Bethany as a disciple? I mean, obviously Alexander Campbell being the guy that founded the college, but is that a normal thing? Disciples coming to like a school like Bethany?
Um, I was originally pre-ministerial, so I didn't really want to be a disciples minister. That's what gets complicated. So I ended up in the Disciples of Christ because they were an active church in the town I lived in. It was a small rural town, Taylorstown, and Bethany. So that seemed like a logical place if you were going to be a disciples minister. But I was really not a Disciples of Christ in thinking. My grandfather founded a Pentecostal denomination. I'm very Scotch Irish, and so I ended up, and now at some point I'm going to become Catholic. We'll see when that happens. But um, that's a long story. I've been married. This is my second marriage, both times to Catholics, and my wife works for the Catholic Church at West Point. So she's the music director at the U.S. Military Academy. So, um, I'm around Catholicism all the time,
Yeah.
and it's been life changing. So, yeah, but a lot of people were disciples. I remember there was a lot of disciples of Christ at the time for the school.
So when you get to Bethany your freshman year, which would have been 1986,
Mm-hmm.
what is campus life like? What do you get involved in right away? What is your Bethany experience?
I decide extremely early on I'm going to join Phi Kappa Tau. And it's funny. JP was he was in charge of pledging.
Mm.
The fifth year senior, JP Silk, and he this goes to the same thing. I mean, he convinced me. He convinced me to do it, but then Christine Hammond, who was dating one of our fraternity brothers, who was a little sister in our fraternity, I just the dearest friend I could ever have. And so she told me, no, this is the place you want to be. And so then I joined the fraternity. And I made that decision probably 2 or 3 weeks into college. And I went to college saying I'm never going to join a fraternity, and I immediately joined one. And it was an exceptional place because we had like 14 guys that were Eagle Scouts, and I was an Eagle Scout. I am an Eagle Scout. I'm not allowed to say was. They get mad at me about that. And so that all mattered to me. And we had a big pledge class. It was the biggest one they had. So JP was we had 19 guys, I believe it was, which for Phi Tau was a lot. We had never recruited so many guys.
So with Greek life, what were some of the experiences? I mean, obviously Greek Hill had to have been a good time in the late 80s, early 90s.
I guess. I mean, a lot of people love to look on college with rose-colored glasses. I don't. I end up, this is going to sound awful. I look at the debt, the amount of money I spent, how I had to pay it back over 10 years. I evaluate whether education was worth it. I had a few professors that I think were exceptional. And most of the time, to be honest, I felt like, so I passed up Brown University. I had a chance to go to Brown, and they were offering me a partial scholarship, and I got a partial scholarship at Bethany. And you look back and you go, well, was that a good decision? Probably not. But the truth is, I'd probably go to a state school. Like if I could go back in time, I probably just would have went to a state school in Pennsylvania, and if I'd have went to college at all. And I have a master's degree in master's.
And the master's does come from a state school.
Yes, it comes from California University of Pennsylvania. Yep, comes from California University of Pennsylvania. But actually, all but one class, or most of it, part of it was done at WVU, and then I transferred. But state universities, cost-wise, I believe education. The difference between education is that either you're meeting the right people, the connections you make are what propel your life forward, or you're paying for a degree. And if you're paying for a degree, you should pay for the least amount of money. And I think that's affected education. Education's become over politicized. It's become a disaster in the United States, and we're wasting time. I mean, what people learned in college, they used to learn in high school, and what they learned in a master's degree, they used to learn in college, and we're just extending life, and then we're having problems. People have trouble having children. People have, because they put their life on hold, and they go into debt. When you only live 75 years on the average, and you're spending 1/3 of it being educated. People didn't do that in the past. No. I mean, it's an absolutely ludicrous decision driven by the needs of educators to make money. And so schools like Bethany, that used to be liberal arts schools, that makes absolute sense. The problem is not everybody should be getting a college education. Instead of 30% of America having a college education, it should probably be 5 or 10. We should be getting people out of high school ready to, at 18 years old, start their life and be productive and make money and find out who they are. And most jobs don't need a degree. It's absolutely useless. So for a whole bunch of things, people become secretaries and have college degrees. That's insane.
So minus.
I mean, you want someone to talk. I'll get people mad at me, and people don't, you either like me or hate me. And actually, I have polling on that when I ran for office. It's about 60% hate me and about 40% love me. And they said the polling numbers were very weird. The 40% that loved me really loved me, and the 60% that hated me really hated me. And I'm okay with that. Like, okay, fine. That's why I don't do many interviews, because it's like, okay.
So minus the rose-colored glasses, what are some of the experiences that you remember from
my
your
fraternity
time?
My fraternity was the best thing in the world, and I loved them. And I'll tell you a strange story. We had a brother of the week, and everybody would name the brother of the week. And I was in the fraternity truly for 3 years, 4 when you count your freshman year, but you're not really there. You're living at the house the other 3. And I never won brother of the week. You only got 30 guys, right? Never once did I get the brother of the week. And yet I got brother of the year. And the year after I graduated, or a year or 2 after, I got alumni of the year.
So not the brother of the week, but you were the brother of the year and the alumni of the year.
Yeah, and I remember I bawled my eyes out, because I was like, what do you mean I'm the brother of the week, of the year? like I never get this. It's fit my whole life. It's a love-hate thing. I've never been to a wedding, invited to a wedding, that I wasn't the best man. I was either the best man or I wasn't invited. And so I've always found that a strange experience, but I've accepted it as who I am. And the reason I got Brother of the Week, oddly enough, I was the security guard for the college, and I busted my own fraternity, and I got Brother of the Year for that. There was brothers who thought I was going to get kicked out of the fraternity, and instead everybody said, no, I did the right thing, we were wrong. And we got fined by the school, and they knew I didn't have any money. I grew up dirt poor, so they voted. I mean, I busted them, so I caused my own self to get fined.
Yeah.
They voted to pay my fine,
which is kind of the embodiment of a brotherhood too. Is that like, you know that we made a mistake, and you were the one that had to bust us, but like you did your job.
And I couldn't pay for my college dues, fraternity. I didn't have enough cash. So I donated the pigs for luau. So I raised the pigs and donated the pigs, and they allowed me. So the national fraternity allowed me to give pigs for
dues,
turtle dues. Yeah, because I lived on a farm. I had my dad had an 80-acre farm, and so I raised two pigs, and I would give them feeder pigs. And then they were like too small because they didn't know how you actually roast pigs. Like they were roasting too big of pigs. I'm surprised people get sick. And I brought them true roasting pigs, like what you're supposed to do if you were in Hawaii or whatever. And they're like, well, they're not big enough. I'm like, that this is the size you roast a pig. You don't roast a 400-pound pig because it's not going to cook right, and you're going to get sick.
Yeah.
And they didn't understand that. And I remember them, that was a funny moment. So then when I graduated, I did a fundraiser at the West Alexander Fair, which is not very far from Bethany, and had I had a booth there selling pizza and pop and stuff to raise money for the fraternity, so that nobody. We had a brother, Zach Brown, who was in the same situation I was. Grew up poor, and I mean he's doing wonderful now. From last I saw. And I said, I'm not going to allow somebody not to be able to afford to go to join the fraternity, so I'll raise you some money. And so we raised money to and that's why I got Alumni of the Year, because I raised them money, not for the stuff like, oh, here's a building plan or whatever. I mean, I'm never, and that's nothing against the people that do that.
No.
But I've always believed you do things directly for people. My Eagle Scout project was raising money for food, or was raising food for the hungry, and the Boy Scouts fought me on it. And so that fight, they said you have to build something permanent, and they said you have to build a bench or something. And I said that a bench, what's permanent about a bench? Catch on fire. Planting a tree is not permanent. A tree dies. It was really funny because I had to go argue before them, and I said, feeding people matters. It's funny because you hear of scouting for food. So what happened was Allegheny Trails fought me on it. And then that got into the scouting news. They said, okay, fine, you can go collect this 1,031, that was our troops number, cans of food and money for, when we gave it to the city mission of Washington, Pennsylvania. And that inspired people in Kansas City to start scouting for food. So my Eagle Scout project
led to
a nationwide feeding of people. And so I've always been like, you have to help people. I'm very unmoney motivated, and which makes my wife angry all the time. But it just, so a lot of the things that motivate people, so that's why I got the award. I never felt like, I'm acquired taste, and I know that. So
you said you originally wanted to go to school for ministry, but you didn't graduate with that degree. What did you end up finishing at Bethany? What was your field?
History. I went to history, and I thought about being a high school teacher, but I hated the idea. I angered I during my oral comprehensives, I made a mistake. They asked me, "What are you going to do with your degree?" And I said something useful and practical, not like teaching, which went over. I wasn't insulting them. I just didn't want to be a high school teacher.
That didn't go
And
over well, though.
no, I wasn't thinking about that. I was saying this really stupid thing. And they were really hard on my comprehensives because I guess I scored really well on the written, thanks to Gary Capel, and his discussion of the Treaty of Versailles, and that was we had to write something on the Treaty of Versailles, which I love. I love Talleyrand and all of that, and Gary helped inspire that. And so I loved Gary. I had two professors that I really loved, Gary Capel and Dr. Woodard, who was only there for 2 years. And they got rid of him. And so that I shouldn't say that Dr. Woodard, no, Dr. Woodard, Dr. Oh shoot, I'm forgetting the poli sci, Dr. Osmond, love Dr. Osmond. And so I forgot what I was saying. Forgive me.
Well, so do you have any?
I wanted to make sure I gave them credit because they were great professors.
Any any stories that you'd like to share from Bubba's or from being in Chambers General Store?
I wasn't a drinker, so I never really liked that whole, like going to the general store. I liked that. That was kind of, I like country stores. My mother worked at one, so I like the feel of that. What I remember is the wood on the floor. I know that sounds weird, but the slat wood and walking in and the smell and feeling like that, it felt like home for me because that was the type of world I came from.
Well, that's a good place. We're going to take a pause right there. I have to send it to Chambers General Store and Harry Chambers because if they don't have it, you don't need it. You get that on the back of your Chambers t-shirts. You can also get the Shroom Capital of the World shirts. I believe it's the third run of those, on top of the daily lunch specials, soups of the day. He's got biscuits and gravy to go with the breakfast sandwiches that he has there, plus any other sandwich you can think of. And literally, you walk in there, you can get a sandwich. And if you have a maintenance project you need to take care of, you can get the tools in the next aisle over. But I am Carlo Guadagnino. This is Cody Knotts, class of 1990, and we will be right back.
While you're in Bethany, make sure you stop in the store for a daily lunch special, breakfast sandwiches all day. Try out the biscuits and gravy, guaranteed it'll fill you up. And also look for our new burnt orange Chambers, if we don't have it, you don't need it t-shirts, and our psychedelic green 3rd edition Bethany Mushroom Capital of the World t-shirts. Now back to you, Dingo.
What's going on, Chuckleheads? I am Carlo Guadagnino. This is the Dingo Talk Alumni Tour. My guest this week is Cody Knotts, class of 1990. And we left off with Cody's opinions on education currently as we sit, and we will come back to that in this part. We talked about his time at Bethany. Now we're going to talk about that test that connects all of us, comps, which you did touch on in the last part. What was being a history major, what was the hardest part for you going into comps? And then follow up with what is the feeling when you walk out after being done?
Well, I went into comprehensives. Someone had tipped me off that I had done really well on my writtens and I could get distinction. In fact, I needed to score, I believe, a 0 to get distinction, or not get distinction. And I guess I got a 0 on oral, which I think is hilarious because they didn't care for me because I spoke my mind too often. Unfortunately, Gary wasn't sitting on comps. I had a professor. I had 2 of the 3 professors, other than Dr. English. They were all people that didn't care for me. One was my basic logics teacher, who I got a D-, the only bad grade I got the whole time I was at Bethany, because I refused to go to class because I thought he treated people like crap. And I said, I'm not going to show up except for tests. And we had an argument about actually the logic of violence. And he said, Aristotle says that violence is not logical. And I said, violence, all of nature's based on violence. So by definition, it has to be logical. And he said, well, I said, I don't care what Aristotle says. Aristotle has to back up what he says. Otherwise, you're appealing to authority. And he would always ask people, you have a question. There's no such thing as a dumb question, that comment. And the moment they did, he would treat them like crap. So I just didn't care to be in his presence. And so I passed barely. So he was there. I had one of the people from religious studies because I was a religious studies minor. And it was a comprehensives where they opened up. They said, when you do as well as you did writing, I remember Dr. English saying this, we asked you tough questions. And the opening question was, what state had the highest per capita fish consumption in 1776? And I'm like, what the hell am I being asked this for? So I said Maine. It was Maryland. Like, anybody actually knows what the actual fish consumption was then. And I now have a master's in science in land use and regional planning and statistics. And it's like, oh, you're kidding me. And that was the whole thing. It was like one got you question after another.
Yeah.
And it was because they weren't going to give me distinction. I wasn't one of the favored people. That's okay. Never have been. And Gracia Sharpenberg, Gracia Manning now, was there. And it was weird because my fraternity brothers, one of our little sisters, I think it was Cindy Drake, had her comprehensives at the same time. So most of the guys were on campus. It was in January, were over there. I thought I'd have nobody other than Gracia when I came out. And that woman is a saint. I love her to death. And when I came out, she had her sisters from Alpha Z there because there was going to be nobody there other than one of my fraternity brothers. And I was like, wow. And we had a party afterwards, and just what a blessing. What a wonderful, wonderful, kind, and incredible human being. So I will owe her my entire life just for that. And I tend to speak very freely, which gets me in trouble. So, but the comprehensive studying for it, I didn't study. I didn't study the entire time I was in college for 4 years. So I don't think I cracked the book outside of a classroom the whole time.
Does that hold true when you go for your master's as well? Is it just a retention thing that you get?
That was unique. There's never been anything in an academic setting. It's funny. I write for a living now and produce films, but my wife has to edit the stuff because I have ideas but not great grammar. And I freely admit that.
Mm-hmm.
We have a publishing company now, and I'm supposed to write a book, but what I'm going to do is write down the ideas and my wife will edit them. And so it's not nothing. There's never been any hard for me to learn. It sounds arrogant, but it's just being honest about it. It deals with humanities and politics and things like that. That's easy. It's really easy. And I have very strong opinions. I have a book I want to write, and the opening of it is about politics, that all politics is a battle between elites for control of the masses. That's all it is. So you have elite individuals, intellectually elite, and manipulate the masses through conversation, through propaganda, whatever. And we take great ideas that are complicated, like something like Adam Smith, and we boil them down to simplicity so that average people can understand them. And that's why you get people believing, even educated people. And I think there's a difference between being educated and intelligent. Educated people buying really bad, dumb ideas.
So how did you get into that coming out of school? So you get your master's, how do you fall into working with movies and writing and producing and now having a publishing company,
I
etc.?
I bought a newspaper, and I was involved in politics at the local level in Washington County. And I helped get rid of the district attorney that was chief suspect in a double homicide. And that is a long, complicated story that no less than Terrence Malick's wife, Eki, one of the living greats, said was the best pitch for a film they've ever heard. And I spent 5 years of my life helping get 3 men that were wrongly accused of murder out of prison, because I desperately know and understand and believe in that people that are accused of things have a right to representation. And it disgusts me when people think that an accusation is truth. And these 3 men, one was a hitman. I mean, his mother told me in an interview, my son knows better than to kill people with witnesses. They didn't hide the fact that they murdered people. They didn't murder that person.
They just weren't guilty of that crime.
Right. And most people would say, hey, that person deserves to go to jail. And there, by the grace of God, go I. And so people will make accusations and say things. And so I risked my life to get these 3 men out of jail, 2 separate cases. And I dealt with a DA who very likely, his son is a judge now, so I'm careful about how I say this. And his son is a good person. I don't want to condemn him in the least for his father. But his father lived an awful life, and it cost me my first marriage. I had to teach my son how to run out of the house to stay alive. My ex-wife and I had plans. She would take the gun and I'd take the ball back, because our house was, they came into our house multiple times. And we had to teach our son at 5 years old how to run. And he said, I'll run to the neighbor. And I said, don't run to the neighbor, you just keep running. And so it was quite an experience. And we ran a guy who just passed the bar for DA, and we had no money. And they had us outspent. In my newspaper, we actually did a story called The Truth About Pettit, the district attorney, and we dropped 10,000 copies around Washington County, house to house. And to tell you how bad it was, no money. We go to the polls. People were standing in front of the polls with made signs. He raped my niece. He did this. He did this about the DA. Mm-hmm. And I go up to a poll, and they have my newspapers piled up, and they're handing them to voters. And I walk in just to check the poll, and I say, you can't hand out that. You're not allowed to hand a newspaper to people on how they're voting. And they walk in, and the judge of election says, I'll do what I please. Who are you? And I said, well, that's my newspaper. I didn't put my name on it. I don't believe in taking credit if I can avoid it. And long story short, I mean, she looks at me and she says, oh, honey, I have a safe house for you. If we don't win, we'll hide you. And after the election, the feds came in and they seized everything on this DA. They took his safe out, the drugs. He was having sex with hookers. That's where the people would say that he was forcing these girls to have sex with him at the jail and all this crazy stuff. And the county executive, or one of the solicitors, said to me, how's it feel to be vindicated, Cody? Because I was told I was wrong for 5 years. And I said, I knew I was right all along. And so did you guys. You knew, because they were there. They knew what was really going on. And I learned how much the supposed powerful and the educated and the people that we supposedly respect, how they will do nothing. And you know, it was very easy for them to go, well, these 3 guys, oh, they're black. 2 of the 3 were black. Well, they're guilty. You know, they're drug dealers. It's so easy for people to join a mob and run with an accusation. And it's so hard to stand there and say, but they have every right to due process. I mean, we talk about John Adams and the Boston Massacre, but we don't realize what it really was for John Adams. Everybody was on the other side. Let's destroy this British soldier. Let's destroy this person for sins we probably committed ourselves. It's why almost every film I put Amazing Grace in, and people don't know the power of forgiveness and why that matters in Christianity and why a Christian school should care about it. You know, the writer of Amazing Grace, by his own admission, was a murderer, a slaver, and a rapist. That's what his book says. And yet we praise him, and he's in movies, and the guy played Mr. Fantastic, you know, is a friend of his in the movie, you know, like all this crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And you know, we all sing it and say, what a beautiful psalm, the most amazing hymn in the English language. But we don't live it. Well, we went through a cancel culture and all this crap, and people condemning people because of their race or their gender or whatever. It's like, give me a break. What makes you so special? Why don't you forgive people? That's hard to do, you know, and that's where I'm in the process of becoming Catholic, in my fault, in my most grievous fault. And I have many things in my life I regret, and I have got on my knees and prayed, and people that have wronged me, and I've asked God to forgive them and give them any part of the happiness given to me. So it's hard to do. It's you know, but that experience that's how I ended up making movies, because at the end I was completely broke and complete disaster. And I was drinking for the first time in my life, and I said, I have to change. And the healing process began. And you know, I got divorced, and a wonderful woman was not dating, not in a relationship, took me in and lifted me up until I met my wife. And she's now a state senator, which is kind of crazy. And we're not even friends anymore, but that's not the point. At that moment in that life, she did for me what nobody else could. And we made a film. We made a couple crappy films. One film I gave up rights in because I hate it, because I was trying to make a Eli Roth type horror film. And I had a plan to make 3 films, and we made the third one, which was Pro Wrestlers, and that's the first one I really got paid on. And we made that with Shane Douglas, and we had a bunch of Bethanians in it: Stephanie Riker, Mark Keenan, who was a wrestler as Cody Michaels. I'm trying to think. There was a group of Bethanians in the film. I don't remember all of them off the top of my head. Those are ones and then you know, I met my current wife, and we moved 5 years ago from Pennsylvania to New York, because she's the music director at West Point, and it's been so I've lived a very interesting life, and I have few friends, and I hold them dearly.
Well, so it seems that from the time you were at Bethany to where you are currently, is that, you know, you're very outspoken, you have an opinion, and you engage in that conversation. But if you're going to say something, you have to back it up. Does that justify kind of your mentality? If you're going to say, like Aristotle said, violence is not or logical, we'll back that up.
Right. Well, so I made a decision that if you believe something, you have to live it. So when I was doing with this DA, everybody said, well, how can you be brave enough to do this? And I mean, I met the U.S. federal attorney at the time, which was Mary Beth Buchanan. I remember after it was all done, so they had wiretaps. They were listening to everything with me all the time. I met her when she was running for Congress. And I walked up to her and I said to him, and if you know who Mary Beth Buchanan is, she's the hardest nosed person you could be. I walk up to her and I say, I'm Cody Knotts. I think you know me. And she turned around and she had tears in her eyes. And she said, yes, I do. And she hugged me and encouraged me to run for state house at the time, which I ran and didn't win. It was the second time I ran. And it was a very weird thing because everybody was looking, because Mary Beth tried to put Cyril Wecht in jail. She put Cheech Marin in jail. She was kind of rough and not the nicest person. But she helped keep me alive.
Yeah.
Her and Tom Corbett, that was Attorney General. Like, I wasn't the biggest fan of him as governor, and people said, "Why are you voting for him?" I said, "Because he helped keep me alive." It's a very simple thing, like, all right, that urged my vote.
Yeah.
And I get, it's really weird. I get something like 24 or 50 write-ins a year, every 4 years, for Attorney General Pennsylvania. I'm not an attorney. Random people in politics write me in, because they did an interview in a newspaper about it, and they said, "Why are you getting write-in votes around the state?" And I said, "Because I helped clean up this county." And it wasn't a dime made for me. Didn't make me a dime. Led to a divorce. When they looked at writing a script, they wanted to make it a happy ending. I said, "Hell no. You sacrificed for Christ because Christ sacrificed for you." And doing the right thing for people that were not guilty of a crime is the point. And no one's going to stand for them. It's much easier to grab the torch and go burn someone. And so God placed that on my heart, and it's been even when the people did something wrong, it's like, forgive them.
Yeah.
I'm very much, this is where I disagree with my Republican friends on prison reform. I'm on the opposite side. And it's not about imprisoning the people I dislike. It's about, what's the point? Rick Perry said, you put people in jail that you're afraid of. And everybody else, we should just be trying to get better. It's not about retribution or revenge. And too many people think it is. And I've had angry people in debates say, "Well, what happens if something happened to your kids?" I said, my first instinct would be to hurt the person. And my second instinct would be, I need to get on my knees and pray. And in fact, the film I just did, Transubstantiation, which that is the theme in it, is the killing of a horrible human being, a violent killer, but he was unarmed and didn't deserve to be killed at that moment. And that's a mortal sin, that the priest commits it. And so the whole film runs on that theme, which has a vampire in it, and it has to do with the blood of Christ, but it's entirely about the idea of forgiveness. And in fact, we do the act of contrition 4 times, which I don't think has ever been done in a film that often. The idea that in my fault, like, I'm not any better than anybody else.
So at the beginning of this episode, you brought up what the issue is in education, and the fact that maybe we shouldn't have 30% of the country educated, collegiately educated. Maybe that number should be somewhere in the 5 to 10% range. Why is that? Why is that where you stand on that?
Because for most people, 99% of people have jobs, right? So you get a job and you go to work and you learn how to do it. So for most people, the idea of that the reason we're educating them is so they can have a trade, so they can do a job, so they can take care of their families. And we don't even have people. What we've had happen in the educated class is they have families, not reproduce, and part of it is they have too much debt. Well, we've had them in school too long, right? Part of it is personal choice, right? And sadly, we don't talk about this. For women, they have 18 to 30, right? That's their peak fertility years, and we're spending it in education and chasing careers, and then people have trouble having children after that date, right? They have it's not impossible, but it's harder. It's harder on them physically. It's harder on and you have this debt. Now you're getting a house, and now you're having a family, and you have no time for your children. So and both parents work, and you send your kids off to daycare. I stay home with my kids. And why? Because in spite of the financial side of it, it's better for them emotionally. It's better for them psychologically. They don't have abandonment issues. They wonder, and we wonder why these kids from wealthy upper middle class families or college educated families are so angry at capitalism. Well, from the time they were born, their parents chose money over them. Why wouldn't they be angry about money? Money they've had their whole life. They don't know what it's like to be poor. I grew up poor. So they're sitting there going, well, mom chose her career, dad chose his career. I'm going to blame both parents. I don't think it's about which gender stays at home. Somebody should. Someone should be focused on the children.
Mm-hmm.
And because what's the purpose, right? I mean, like we talk about purpose-driven lives. Most people go, well, I'm going to have this career. They don't have careers. They have jobs, right? We go home, we watch entertainment, we watch interesting people. I make movies. They watch interesting people live interesting lives.
Yeah.
While you're not living one, right? And without faith, without any basis of anything, they're living lives detached. And when you look at the end of your life, and at 53 years old, you start looking at the end. My mother just died in October, my last of my parents. You know the end is coming. You know that's the end. And what did it mean? And so and education has been like, I jump through this hoop and I jump through this hoop and I jump through this hoop and I spend a lot of money, right? Mm-hmm. And who makes the money? The banks and the administrators. I'm not even going to blame the professors because a lot of them are working as adjuncts and that. These people at the top, the administrators and the whole system, and they're just making money off of people.
Well, and that's
and not moving their life forward.
Well, let's bring this all together for the last two questions. And I think that, judging by the way this interview has gone, I'm sure you have an opinion on this first question. What would you say here in 2022 the brand is for Bethany College? How are they marketing to a student to make Bethany not relative, but worth the price? What is Bethany providing that you can't get at a state school or another small private institution?
We're going to charge you more. And given the graduation rate at whatever it is, 24%, we're going to charge you more, and that's it. And I know they don't want to hear that. Okay, this costs more. And it costs the Cadillac, but what you're getting is a Yugo. Okay. And I know JP's going to yell at me, but it's just, I sent a student that had a chance to go to Cal Arts. He ended up at Cal Arts to Bethany because of the two Oscar, because of William H. Macy and Frances McDormand. And they didn't even tell me their experience because it was so bad. Wow. And yeah, because the schools, if you're going to charge top dollar, you better be demanding. You better not accept everybody. You better push for excellence. You better be committed. I mean, this whole argument about the new president and his politics drives me nuts, because the truth is, my wife turned to me and she said, given the politics of most of the area where the school recruits from, they'd be better off with someone that liked Donald Trump than someone who didn't. Okay, it might anger the alumni, but guess what? They need to change. And they need to find a way to challenge people intellectually, which requires free thought. It requires saying things that other people aren't expecting you to say, and not going, well, you can't say that, right? So you have schools like University of Chicago, which are committed to free speech, mm-hmm. in spite of everything going on in the culture, and they're flourishing. And that entire discussion on there and the passive aggressive stuff. Well, I don't really mean to be saying this. Of course you are. And when I worked in politics, what we used to say was, we quoted James Carville on this all the time, that if you're going to call someone a son of a bitch, my son just walked in here, my oldest son, call him a son of a bitch, because anything else lowers your character, right? don't play this game that it's not about the politics of the person. It's really about how they got hired, which is what most of these posters are doing. Okay? Yay. Why don't you be honest and say what your real reason is? Because if your only goal is that he shouldn't have hired himself based upon the thing, that's a legitimate concern. That's a legitimate argument. And you don't bring the politics up at all. Okay? It doesn't matter what his politics are.
Mm-hmm.
And if half the country roughly believes that the election wasn't fair, okay, and half the country before believed that it wasn't fair when Trump got elected, and half the country before didn't believe it was fair when George Bush got elected, the other half, then it's legitimate to question the results. Because anybody that worked in politics, and I worked in it for 29 years, knows people fix elections. People cheat on their freaking wives, right? People cheat on tests in school. A lot of the people listening probably did, but they don't think anybody cheats on an election. Who the hell are they talking to? Right? Tammany Hall didn't exist. Like, I sat with people and they told me how they would fix elections at the local level. They say we'd move 5%, Cody, because then we usually win. If 5% doesn't win, we better not do it because it's going to cause chaos. Right? And so that doesn't mean it happened. It means that it's a legitimate possibility and it's not easy to prove.
Mm-hmm.
It's never been easy to prove. Because that's the game. And everybody, I mean, all of us inside of it know. And so then we get up there and Nick, they need to stay in the other room. Sorry, I got to walk.
All good. So the last question would be, why Bethany? If you're trying to get, what are you sending if you're sending somebody to Bethany today, why are you sending them to Bethany?
I can't make a good case for it. If somebody came to me, and I had a friend at one point, and she wanted to go somewhere, and she went to Waynesburg, similar college,
Mm-hmm.
I think in better shape. I said, why are you doing that? Go to a state school. Don't spend the money. Right? Unless you have a program that, like they used to have in communications, that was dedicated to excellence, that had contacts built in, right? So the school's number one priority, if I was revamping the school, number one focus would be, how do we get these people into the fields in which they're going to be in? And I don't care if the professor has a doctorate. I care that they know how to do the field.
Yeah.
I used to make a joke, and this was about high school. Bill Gates and Steve Jobs can't teach college or teach computer science in schools in Pennsylvania.
Because they don't have a degree.
Right. Elon Musk can't. That's idiotic.
Yeah, a little bit.
It absolutely shows the ludicrousness of what we've done with education, because we forgot that the word is educate. We forgot that the word was to teach, for people to learn. And having lived at West Point for 3 years, I saw that you can challenge young men and young women and demand of them to be superb, demand of them to be excellent, and they will be drawn like flies to shit to do it.
Well, Cody, I think that's a good place. I think it's a great place to end, actually.
Oh, I know. I'm going to make all kinds of people angry. Yay.
I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to stop by and chat with us. I am Carlo Guadagnino. You can find us on TikTok. It's at DingoTalk, Instagram, Dingo_talk, or Twitter at DingoTalk. We post every week there. This has been Cody Knotts, class of 1990. I'm Carlo Guadagnino. This is the Dingo Talk Alumni Tour, and we will see you next week, Chuckleheads.
I know by now.